I stood at my son's engagement party watching as everyone celebrated, yet feeling more alone than ever. His fiancée called me a disaster in front of the guests, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. I had spent years giving everything to my family, only to be shoved to the background, ignored, and disrespected. That night, something inside me snapped. I realized I didn't have to be invisible anymore. I bought their wedding venue, kicked them out, and let them feel the consequences of treating me like I didn't matter. If you've ever been made to feel invisible or taken for granted, this story is for you. Subscribe now and join me on this journey of reclaiming your power. My name is Claire. I'm a mother, a daughter, and a woman who's been through more than her fair share of heartache, betrayal, and disappointments. You know the feeling when you've given everything for someone, only to be told it wasn't enough. That's where I was, standing at the edge of my son's engagement party, watching as everything I had built for him and for myself started to unravel. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I had spent the last few months helping Daniel, my son, and his fiancée, Emily, plan what I was led to believe would be one of the happiest days of my life. I thought I was doing everything right. I thought I was being a good, supportive mother. You see, for all of my life, I had been the one to clean up the messes, pick up the pieces, and make sure everyone else was taken care of. But in return, I had always been left behind, treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. The engagement party was meant to be a celebration. It was supposed to mark a new chapter in Daniel's life, and by extension, mine. I was supposed to be there, front and center, proud of my son, watching as he stepped into the next phase of his adult life. But as the evening wore on, I felt the familiar sting of being invisible. I stood at the edge of the room, nursing a glass of wine, watching everyone else mingle. I tried to smile, tried to convince myself that it was just the nerves, the excitement, that made me feel so distant. But as I glanced around, I realized it wasn't just me. It was the way people looked through me, as if I wasn't really there. I was just a shadow, a bystander at my own son's celebration. And that's when I noticed it. Emily, standing beside Daniel, her arm linked with his, was making a pointed effort to ignore me. Her eyes avoided mine as she laughed with the guests, her laugh ringing through the air like a bell, high and bright, like she was the only one who mattered. The sight of them, the two of them, so happy and so content while I stood there, invisible and small, made something inside of me snap. I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself that it was just nerves, that I was overreacting. But the more I watched them, the more I realized something deeper was at play. Emily didn't just want to keep me at arm's length. She wanted to erase me completely. I was no longer the mother of the groom, the person who had carried Daniel for 9 months and raised him on her own, the one who had sacrificed everything for his happiness. No, I was just the woman who paid for things, who made sure the wedding was planned, but never acknowledged, never celebrated. The moment I realized I was the outsider, the moment I realized I was nothing but a background piece in the story of Daniel and Emily, was the moment my resolve hardened. I'd had enough. I had been patient. I had been kind. I had played my part for far too long. I had stood in the background, a silent observer of my own life, and it was time for that to change. The tension in the room was palpable. As I stood there watching them interact with the guests, I saw a glimmer of something in Emily's eyes. It wasn't love or respect or appreciation. It was something else. I had seen that look before, but I couldn't quite place it. Then, as if on cue, she turned to one of her bridesmaids and said, loud enough for me to hear, "My future mother-in-law? She's a disaster. I don't know how we're going to make this work." The words hit me like a slap. A disaster. That's what I was now. An inconvenience, a problem that needed to be dealt with. Emily didn't care about me. She didn't care about my role in Daniel's life. I had spent the last few months helping her with everything, from the wedding plans to the guest list to the venue. And this was how she saw me. A disaster? The more I thought about it, the more it sank in. This wasn't just a little jab. This was deliberate. Emily knew exactly what she was doing, and Daniel, my son, was letting her get away with it. He didn't defend me. He didn't stand up for me. He didn't even look my way. Instead, he was too busy basking in Emily's glow, too busy to remember who had helped him get here. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the familiar tightness in my throat, but I didn't react. I couldn't let them see me crack. I had spent too long hiding my true feelings, too long swallowing the hurt. But this was the breaking point. They wanted to erase me from their lives? Fine. Let them. I stepped away from the group, excusing myself to the bathroom. I needed a moment, just a moment to collect myself, to stop the tears that threatened to spill over. But as I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection, I realized something. I had been doing this for too long, letting people walk all over me, letting them take everything and give nothing in return. I had let Emily and Daniel treat me like I was disposable, and I had let them because I thought that's what a mother does. But now, I knew better. I wasn't just going to stand there and let them humiliate me. No, I wasn't going to be their afterthought, their prop any longer. I had worked too hard, given too much, and it was time for me to make a stand. I walked out of the bathroom with a new sense of purpose, the weight of what I had to do settling in my chest. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew what had to be done. It was time for me to take control of the situation, to take back my power, and to show Emily and Daniel exactly who they were dealing with. And that's exactly what I planned to do. They wanted a disaster? Well, they hadn't seen anything yet. The next few hours felt like a blur. The engagement party continued, a swirl of laughter, chatter, and clinking glasses that seemed to mock the silence I felt in my chest. I stood there, trying to force a smile, but everything around me felt hollow, as if I were watching a play from the sidelines. They were all playing their parts, the perfect couple, the doting friends and family and me, just an extra in the background. But that wasn't going to be my story anymore. I wasn't going to be the invisible woman, the one who gave and never asked for anything in return. I wasn't going to stand by and pretend everything was okay when it was clearly not. No one had ever treated me as the person I was. No one saw me, not as a mother, not as a woman who had worked her entire life to build something for her family. No one had ever given me the courtesy of respect or appreciation, and I was done waiting for it. The evening wore on, but my mind was made up. I didn't care if they were celebrating. I didn't care if they had the perfect venue or the perfect wedding. None of that mattered to me anymore. What mattered was what I was going to do next. I didn't want to make a scene. No, I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. But I wasn't going to let them get away with this either. They had crossed a line. Emily had insulted me to my face, and Daniel had stood there, his hands in his pockets, looking at the floor as if he didn't know me at all. The mother who raised him, the one who paid for everything in his life, the one who fought tooth and nail to give him a better future. So I did what any mother who had been pushed too far would do. I made the decision. I was going to take control, and I wasn't going to ask for permission. It wasn't as if I hadn't planned for the wedding. I had been the one who had been on top of everything. Scouting venues, meeting with florists, tasting cakes, and negotiating with caterers. I had spent countless hours ensuring every detail was perfect. I had put my heart into this, not because I wanted to be thanked, but because I wanted Daniel to have the wedding he dreamed of. But that was before I realized how little I mattered to him, how easily he let Emily diminish me. It was before I understood that, for all my sacrifices, I would never be enough. The venue was already booked. I had signed the contracts, paid the deposits, and approved every aspect of the event. All the arrangements were set. Everything was in place. Except one thing. I was no longer willing to let them use me. I took out my phone, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. I wasn't going to waste my time justifying my actions. The truth was, I didn't owe anyone an explanation anymore. They had taken everything from me, my pride, my sense of worth, and now my place at their wedding. I dialed the venue coordinator, my fingers gripping the phone like a lifeline. The phone rang twice before someone picked up. "Hello, this is Sarah from Grand Oak Manor. How can I help you?" I took a deep breath, my voice calm and steady. "Sarah, it's Claire Langley. I need to cancel the reservation for Daniel Langley's wedding." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, you said the wedding for Mr. Daniel Langley," she repeated, clearly surprised. "That wedding is set for next month. Are you sure about this? The contract?" "I'm sure. Please cancel everything. The venue, the catering, the music, the works. It's all canceled." I could hear her scrambling, papers rustling on the other end. "But ma'am, there's a cancellation fee and the contract states—" "I know the contract," I interrupted, my tone firm, unwavering. "Just cancel it, all of it. I've paid my part and that's enough." There was another pause. I could almost hear her trying to process my request, perhaps wondering if I was serious or just emotional. But I wasn't emotional. Not anymore. I had made my choice and nothing was going to change it. "Understood, ma'am. We'll begin the cancellation process right away," Sarah said, her voice professional now, though I could sense the confusion still lingering in her words. "I'll send you a confirmation email. Is there anything else I can do for you?" "Number. That will be all." I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands didn't shake. There was no sense of guilt, no second guessing. Just a feeling of calm, like a storm had passed, and now the skies were clear. I looked across the room where Daniel and Emily were laughing with their friends. The night seemed to stretch on endlessly, but I felt lighter, unburdened. I had taken back control. They were not going to walk all over me anymore. But I wasn't done. No, I still had more to do. This wasn't just about the wedding. This wasn't just about a canceled venue or a few upset wedding guests. This was about the years of being ignored, of being taken for granted, of being treated like I was invisible in my own family. I walked out onto the terrace, the cool evening air hitting my face, and stared out at the city lights below. There was something liberating about this, something freeing. For once, I wasn't holding myself back. I wasn't going to let anyone push me around anymore. If Emily wanted to control every detail of the wedding, let her. But she wouldn't control me. Not now. Not ever again. I knew I had to make some other calls. There were still a few vendors to reach, and I wasn't about to let them think they could hold me to a contract that I no longer felt bound by. I picked up my phone again. This time, it was the florist. "Hello, this is Margaret from Blooming Rose Florists. How can I help you today?" The voice on the other end chirped. "Margaret, it's Claire Langley again. Please cancel the flower delivery for Daniel's wedding. The entire event is off. Don't process any further payments," I said, my voice cold, firm, and unwavering. "You're sure?" she asked, the surprise evident in her voice. "I'm sure," I replied. "Cancel it. Don't send another arrangement. I don't want anything. Just cancel it." "Understood. I'll send you confirmation right away." I hung up, feeling a sense of power slowly creeping in. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, a burden I hadn't even realized I was carrying until it was gone. I wasn't going to be anyone's doormat anymore. The night wasn't over yet, and neither was I. They might have thought they could push me aside, but I was just getting started. The party raged on behind me, but I felt a sense of finality in the air. The decisions I had made in the last few minutes were irreversible, and for the first time in a long while I felt empowered. No more apologies, no more excuses. I had finally chosen to stand up for myself. I didn't care how they would react, didn't care if they would be angry or upset. I was past caring. For years, I had been the person who stood in the background, who did everything for everyone else, and who never asked for anything in return. And look where that had gotten me, sitting in the shadows, unacknowledged, ignored, and belittled. I wasn't about to continue playing that role any longer. The phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I knew who it was before I even looked. Daniel. He'd been calling me for the past few hours, his name lighting up my screen with each call, each message. I didn't need to answer. I didn't want to answer. He didn't deserve my time or my attention. But still, I couldn't help the brief moment of hesitation that gripped me as I looked at his name. I clicked on the message thread and saw a flurry of texts that only confirmed what I already knew. They were starting to feel the weight of the decisions I'd made. Daniel, Mom, where are you? Everyone is asking for you. Daniel, why aren't you here? Daniel, this is ridiculous. Are you upset about the seating arrangement? It's not a big deal. Just come back out, please. Each message stung more than the last, the words both pleading and demanding, as if he could still expect me to comply after everything. It was laughable. Not a big deal? For him, maybe, but for me, it was everything. It wasn't about the seating. It was about the blatant disrespect, the disregard for me and everything I had done for him. I quickly typed a response, my fingers moving with purpose. Claire. The wedding is canceled. I've already informed the venue, the florist, and the band. I will not be part of this anymore. I hit send and put my phone on silent. I couldn't listen to him anymore. I couldn't hear the excuses or the apologies that would come. He didn't understand yet. He probably wouldn't for a while. But in that moment, I realized something. He didn't need to. I wasn't doing this for him or for Emily. I was doing it for me. The cool air from the terrace felt like a balm against my skin as I walked to the side of the house. I needed a moment to collect myself, to process everything. But there was no time for self-pity. The consequences of my actions were already unfolding, and I had no doubt they would come rushing at me soon enough. I stepped back inside, and the room was just as loud, just as chaotic. But I was different now. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. I wasn't just the mother of the groom anymore. I was a woman who had made herself a priority for the first time in years. As I moved through the crowd, I felt their eyes on me. Some of them, the people who didn't really know me, looked curious, confused. Others, the ones who had seen me quietly suffer for years, looked sympathetic, even guilty. But none of them spoke to me directly, and that's when I realized I wasn't just invisible to my son. I had been invisible to everyone for so long, and I hadn't even realized it. I spotted Emily across the room, surrounded by her bridesmaids, all of them laughing and chatting like they didn't have a care in the world. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second I saw something shift in her expression. It wasn't guilt or regret. It was more of a challenge, like she was daring me to do something, to make a scene, to react. But I didn't take the bait. I was done reacting. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I walked past her, my head held high, and left the party. I didn't look back. The drive home was quiet, the hum of the engine the only sound that filled the car. The weight of everything that had happened was starting to settle on my shoulders, but I refused to let it break me. I had done what I needed to do. I had reclaimed my power, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially Daniel, make me feel small again. As I pulled into the driveway of my house, I saw the familiar outline of the roses I had planted in the front yard, their petals soft and blooming under the dim streetlight. The house looked the same, but everything inside me had shifted. I walked inside, shutting the door behind me. The house was quiet, too quiet. It was the kind of silence that should have felt lonely, but instead, it felt like peace. I had no regrets. None. What I had done was necessary, for my own sanity and for my own self-respect. I walked into the living room, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. My gaze landed on the mantel, where pictures of Daniel and I used to sit. There were no photos of him now, not here, not anywhere. Not until he proved to me he deserved to be in my life again. I sat down on the couch, the cushions molding around me as I sank in. The weight of everything I had done, Everything I had given and everything I had lost felt like a physical presence in the room. But it was no longer a weight I carried alone. The phone buzzed again, another call from Daniel. This time, I ignored it completely. I wasn't going to be pulled back into his world of demands and expectations. This was my time now. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, where I poured myself a glass of wine. The soft red liquid slid into the glass, its deep color a perfect reflection of how I felt: strong, bold, and steady. I sat back down at the table, slowly sipping the wine, letting the bitterness of it settle on my tongue. It was exactly what I needed. I had made the right decision. I knew that now. The only thing left to do was wait for them to realize the consequences of their actions. They had thought they could erase me, humiliate me, and get away with it. But I wasn't done. I would make them see who I was, who I had always been. And I wasn't going to be their second choice anymore. I had done enough for them. Now it was time to live for me. The silence in my house stretched on long after I put down the wine glass. For the first time in years, I had nothing to worry about, no one to please, no one to answer to. But it wasn't just relief I felt. There was an odd kind of stillness, a calm before the storm. I could feel the tension building, and I knew it wouldn't be long before the calls and the apologies came flooding in. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing on the bedside table. The screen lit up with multiple missed calls, texts, and voicemails from Daniel, from Emily, from the wedding planner, and even a few friends who I didn't recognize as having my number. They were all reaching out, frantic, confused, angry, and I was calm. I was in control. I ignored the first few calls, let them stew, let them try to make sense of what I had done. I wasn't going to explain myself, not anymore. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I had done what was right for me. If they couldn't understand that, then that was their problem. But after the 6th call from Daniel, the 7th message from Emily, I knew it was time to face them. I couldn't hide from this forever. I picked up the phone and dialed the wedding planner first. I had to put a stop to everything officially. "Hello, Claire. I've been trying to get a hold of you. There's been some confusion. Why did you cancel everything? The venue is in chaos. The caterer is asking where to deliver the food for the reception. We need to figure this out." The wedding planner's voice came through in a rushed, panicked tone. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath before responding. "Cancel it all. Every last detail. No reception, no flowers, no catering. I've already made my decision." "You don't understand," the planner started, but I interrupted her, my voice sharp, unwavering. "I understand perfectly. I've been more than patient with them, with all of you. But I've had enough. My decision is final. Please make sure that the rest of the wedding is called off. I'm not interested in negotiating, and I won't be signing off on any more payments." She hesitated, then said, "I'm really sorry, Claire. I wish I had known about this beforehand. There's a lot to undo. We've already paid a deposit for some of these services. There will be financial repercussions." I didn't flinch. "I'll deal with the financial consequences. I'm not worried about that. Just cancel it." She paused again, and I could hear the hesitation in her voice. "All right, I'll take care of it. But this is going to cause some serious fallout with the family." "I'm already prepared for that," I replied, hanging up before she could say anything else. It was time to turn my attention to the next call. Daniel. I couldn't avoid him forever. He was my son, after all. And despite everything that had happened, there was still a part of me that wanted him to understand why I had done what I did. I dialed his number, watching as the phone rang. When he picked up, his voice was shaky, as if he was still trying to grasp what had happened. "Mom, what is going on? I've been trying to call you all night. Where are you? Why did you cancel everything? We need to talk." I took a deep breath. "We'll talk, Daniel. But understand this. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I've been hurt again and again by you and by Emily. You both have used me, manipulated me, and treated me like I don't matter. And I'm done. I'm done being the silent contributor to your perfect wedding while I'm pushed to the side." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him trying to process my words, but I wasn't going to back down now. He had to hear it. He had to understand. "You don't get it," Daniel said, his voice rising. "This isn't about you, Mom. This is about us. This is about Emily and me starting our lives together, and you're making this so much harder. The venue is booked. People are flying in from all over the place. This is a huge deal. You can't just cancel everything like this." I didn't shout back. I didn't need to. I'd learned over the years that silence can be just as powerful. "I can and I will, Daniel. I spent months trying to make you happy, trying to please Emily. I spent every last penny I had to make sure you had the wedding of your dreams. But not once did either of you consider how I felt. Not once did you think about how I've been sidelined in my own life. Well, now it's my turn to do what's best for me." He didn't respond right away, and I could hear the muffled sounds of his frustration on the other end of the line. "This is childish, Mom. You're embarrassing me." "Am I?" I said, a small, bitter smile tugging at my lips. "I'm embarrassed too, Daniel. I'm embarrassed by how easily you let Emily push me aside, how quickly you threw me away. I'm embarrassed that I've given so much of myself and you still don't see me. You don't see what I've done for you, for your future. It's always been about you, but never about me." "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "I don't get it. Why are you making this harder than it has to be?" I could feel the tears welling up, but I forced them down. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about standing up for myself. I had been quiet for far too long. "I'm doing this because I've been quiet for too long, because I've let you walk all over me, let you take my love and my support for granted. And I'm done, Daniel. I'm done being invisible in your life." The silence that followed felt suffocating. He didn't know how to respond. He didn't know how to handle a mother who was no longer willing to play the part she had been given in his world. "I'll handle the consequences, Daniel," I said, my voice softer now, but firm. "You and Emily have your life, and I have mine. We're done." I hung up, finally allowing the tears to slip out. But they weren't tears of sorrow. No, these were tears of release, of freedom. I had done what I needed to do, and now I was ready to face whatever came next. The calls continued to come in, but I didn't answer. The wedding, the plans, the guests, they could all deal with the consequences of their actions. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. I had taken back my life. It was time for them to see what happened when you pushed someone too far. I stood up from the chair, feeling the weight of my decision settle on my shoulders. The storm wasn't over, not by a long shot, but it didn't matter. I was done hiding. It was their turn to face the consequences. The days after I made my decision were a whirlwind of emotions and consequences. I didn't expect things to settle easily. No, I knew better. I knew Daniel, Emily, and everyone else would be furious, confused, and possibly even vindictive. But what I didn't expect was the weight of their anger and the sheer force with which they tried to make me reconsider. The first few days were filled with phone calls, messages, and increasingly desperate attempts to get me to change my mind. But there was something about the way their voices trembled, the urgency behind their pleas, that told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just worried about the wedding. They were terrified of losing control. It started with Emily's mother. She was the first to call after Daniel. I could hear the practiced sweetness in her voice, the tightness that came with trying to mask her true feelings. "Claire, darling, I think we need to talk," Susan said, her voice laced with forced concern. "What you've done, it's a bit dramatic, don't you think? I mean, you've always been a bit much, but this?" She sighed heavily. "We need to find a way to fix this. Daniel and Emily, they've been beside themselves, and frankly, I think you owe them an apology. This wedding was supposed to be a beautiful celebration. You've ruined it." I could hear her voice rise as she spoke, the tone shifting from polite concern to something darker, something sharper. But I wasn't about to let her get under my skin. "Susan," I said, my voice even, "I don't owe anyone an apology. What I owe is myself. For too long, I've let other people dictate my worth. For too long, I've bent over backwards for others. Well, not anymore. You can call it dramatic if you like, but it's my decision, and I'm not changing it." There was a silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment I almost thought she would relent. But no, Susan wasn't someone who gave up easily. "I don't understand you, Claire. You've always been so strong, so independent. But this isn't the woman I thought I knew. You're letting your emotions rule you. You're throwing everything away." "Everything?" I echoed. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm taking back what's mine. My dignity, my peace of mind, my right to be seen and respected. I've given them everything, and they've never even bothered to look at me. They think they can throw me away because they don't need me anymore, but they're wrong. I'm not disposable." Susan's sigh was heavy, and I could practically hear her rolling her eyes on the other end. "Fine. Do what you want, Claire. But don't come crying to me when the fallout from this ruins everything. Daniel won't forgive you for this." Before I could respond, she hung up. And that was just the beginning. The next call was from Daniel. His tone was quieter, more frustrated than panicked, but there was still an undercurrent of disbelief that ran through his words. "Mom," he started, "I don't get it. Why are you doing this? Why are you throwing everything away? You said you'd help me, and I've asked for so little over the years. What's the point of all this? You're making me look like the bad guy, like I don't care about you." I shook my head as I held the phone to my ear, my mind racing. There it was again. The guilt, the manipulation, the same emotional blackmail I had been fed for years. It was always about him, always about his feelings, his comfort, his needs, never about me. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady but firm, "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm making a choice to stop being invisible, to stop sacrificing myself for you. You've taken so much from me, and you've never once asked if I was okay. You think I don't care about you, but this is about me finally caring about myself." He was silent for a long time, the crackling tension between us thick enough to suffocate. "I just don't get it," he finally said, his voice small. "Mom, you're my mother. Why are you doing this to me?" "Because I have to," I replied quietly, "because you didn't leave me any other choice." I hung up without another word, knowing that this time there was no going back. But even as the calls and messages kept coming in, I stood my ground. I wasn't afraid of the consequences anymore. In fact, I welcomed them. I was done being the person who did everything for everyone else. I'd spent too many years being the person everyone could rely on, the one who made everything happen. And now it was time for me to step back and let them handle their own mess. The next few days were a blur of chaos. I could feel the weight of their anger and frustration bearing down on me from all sides. But I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. I had made my decision, and there was nothing left to discuss. Then came the final blow. Emily, the woman who had made me feel like I was nothing but a nuisance in her perfect world, decided to reach out. But her message wasn't what I expected. It wasn't filled with apologies or even anger. No, it was something else entirely. It was a cold, calculated attempt to remind me of just how much I had lost. Emily's message: "I just wanted to remind you that I'm the one marrying Daniel. I'm the one who's going to be part of his future, not you. You had your time. This is my time now. So while you may think you've won, just remember that you're going to be left behind. And that's all on you." I stared at the screen, the words burning a hole in my chest. But they didn't hurt the way I thought they would. No, instead, they gave me a strange sense of clarity. She wasn't just trying to hurt me. She was trying to make me feel small. She was trying to remind me of my place, of how she thought I didn't belong, but I wasn't going to let her, not anymore. I turned off my phone and threw it on the couch. I wasn't going to let them control me any longer. They could have their wedding, their life, their perfect world, but I was going to have mine. The next few days passed in a strange quiet. No more phone calls, no more frantic messages, just a strange peace that settled over me, like a heavy blanket, keeping out the noise. I spent the time focusing on myself, on what I wanted. I visited old friends I hadn't seen in years. I took long walks in the park. I cooked meals just for me, with no one to cater to but myself. It was strange at first, but in the best way. And then, as the days wore on, something unexpected happened. I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. I started to feel alive again. I wasn't just someone's mother, someone's doormat. I was Claire, and that was enough. The storm had broken, but instead of drowning in it, I was learning to swim. As the days turned into weeks, the initial storm of backlash from Daniel and Emily slowly began to subside, but the ripple effects of my decisions were just beginning to take shape. At first, I felt the familiar sting of guilt. I had always been the one to smooth things over, to try and make amends, to show up for everyone else no matter how little they showed up for me. It was hard to quiet the voices in my head telling me I was being selfish. It was hard not to pick up the phone when I saw their names on the screen, to not reach out and apologize for the chaos I had caused. But I didn't. I couldn't. For the first time in my life, I had made a choice that wasn't about anyone else. It was about me. It wasn't about repairing the relationships that had long been broken. It was about rebuilding myself. And I wasn't about to undo that just because things got uncomfortable. I spent the next few weeks living in a way that I hadn't in years. The house felt different. Quieter, yes, but not lonely. There was a peace to it now, a sense of control I hadn't realized I was missing. I spent time with friends, went out for coffee with people who actually saw me, who cared about me for me, not for what I could do for them. It was small things, really, but it was the first time in ages I felt truly valued. I joined a book club I had been meaning to sign up for years. I took painting classes on the weekends, something I had always wanted to try but never had time for. I even took a spontaneous weekend trip to the coast just to breathe the salty air and watch the ocean stretch out before me, endless and free. For the first time in so long, I didn't feel guilty for enjoying myself. I didn't feel like I was taking something from anyone. I wasn't asking for permission to be happy anymore. But as my life began to shift, so did my understanding of what it meant to be truly free. I realized something profound. My worth wasn't tied to my family. It wasn't tied to how much I could give or how much I could sacrifice. My worth was in my voice, my choices, and my ability to say no more. The first time I ran into someone from the wedding, it was almost by accident. I had gone to the local farmer's market early on a Saturday morning, enjoying the crisp air and the bustle of the small town. I was picking through some fresh tomatoes when I heard a familiar voice. Claire? It was her, Susan, the same woman who had scolded me for ruining Daniel's wedding. Her smile was tight, forced, and as soon as I turned around, I saw the awkwardness in her eyes. She didn't know how to approach me. She didn't know if she should act like everything was fine or if she should apologize for the way she'd treated me. She settled for something in between. Hey, Claire, I didn't expect to see you here. How have you been? She asked, though her voice lacked the warmth it once had. It was like she was tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. I took a moment to look at her, to gauge her sincerity. I had no intention of letting her off the hook for the way she'd dismissed me, but I had also come to terms with something important. My peace didn't come from holding on to grudges. It came from letting go. I've been well, Susan. Really well, I said, smiling softly. Taking some time for myself. Things have changed. I'm learning to enjoy life a little more these days. I let the words hang in the air, casual but pointed. Her eyes flickered with something. Maybe guilt, maybe discomfort, but she quickly masked it with a fake smile. "That's good, really good to hear. Daniel misses you, you know? He's been asking about you. And Emily, well, she was really upset about how everything turned out. It's been hard for them." I felt a familiar wave of emotion rise, but this time I didn't let it take over. I didn't need their validation, not anymore. I wasn't their scapegoat, and I certainly wasn't their excuse for a perfect wedding. "I'm sure it's been hard," I said, not unkindly, but firmly. "But Susan, sometimes things need to fall apart before they can rebuild. I've spent so much of my life keeping everything together for everyone else. Now it's time to do something for me." There was a long pause. Susan shifted uncomfortably. She had no response. She wasn't used to hearing those words from me. She wasn't used to me being the one who took charge of my own life. But in that moment, I knew I didn't need her approval. I didn't need any of them to understand what I was doing or why. "Well, I'm glad you're doing better," she said with a tight smile. "We should get together soon." But I knew what that really meant. She was trying to smooth things over, trying to remind me of the way things used to be. But those days were over. "Sure," I replied, my voice cool but polite. "Maybe sometime. Take care, Susan." I walked away feeling stronger than I had in years. I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their pity. I had learned something in the weeks since I had made my choice. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was complete on my own. As the days passed, I continued to distance myself from the toxic elements of my past. I didn't reach out to Daniel, and I didn't chase after Emily or anyone else who had ignored me. The truth was, the more time I spent away from them, the clearer it became that they weren't the ones who needed to change. I was, and I had. The months rolled by, and though the sting of what had happened still lingered, I no longer saw it as a wound. It was a lesson. I had learned that I could stand on my own, that I could take up space, and that I didn't need to be anyone's afterthought anymore. And as the seasons shifted, so did my perspective. I didn't need a big wedding or grand gestures to feel important. I didn't need to be celebrated by anyone else. The real celebration came from inside. It was the quiet, everyday moments of peace. The contentment I found in my own company, the laughter I shared with friends who truly saw me. Eventually, I received a letter from Daniel, a simple note no longer filled with anger or demands, but one that reflected a shift in his own understanding. It was his apology, a real one, not laced with guilt or self-pity, and for the first time in a long time, I read it without feeling the need to respond immediately. I sat down, thought about it, and realized I had already forgiven him. Not for him, but for me. It wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about letting go of the weight I had carried for so long. I had made my decision long ago to reclaim my life, my peace, and my power. And nothing, not even blood, could take that away from me. I was no longer the woman who had to beg for recognition. I was Claire, the woman who had learned to stand in her own light. And for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I needed to be. The air felt different now. The weight that had clung to me for so long was gone, replaced by a new kind of lightness, a new sense of purpose. I was no longer the woman who hid behind everyone else's expectations, or who kept quiet because she was told she wasn't enough. For the first time in my life, I was free. Free from the guilt, the hurt, and the self-imposed obligations that had once defined me. The change in me wasn't dramatic. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was there, slowly creeping into every part of my life. I began to make small, everyday decisions that reflected who I had become, not who I used to be. One of those decisions was to stop apologizing for everything. I had spent so much time in my life apologizing for my feelings, for my needs, for taking up space. I had spent years believing that my worth was measured by how much I could give to others, how much I could sacrifice, how much I could endure without ever demanding anything in return. But now, I realized something vital. I didn't have to apologize for wanting to be seen, for wanting to be heard, for wanting to exist fully in the world without shrinking myself to accommodate everyone else's expectations. It wasn't just about Daniel and Emily anymore. It was about me, about my right to choose my own path, to make decisions that were best for me without fear of judgment. And the more I embraced that freedom, the more I began to see that this new path wasn't just about rejecting my past. It was about embracing my future. The first major step in this new direction came when I decided to sell the house. It wasn't a decision I took lightly. This house had been the backdrop of so many memories, both good and bad. It had been the place where Daniel had grown up, where I had raised him, where we had shared so many meals, so many quiet evenings. But it was also the place where I had been invisible, where I had spent years putting everyone else first and watching as my own dreams slipped away unnoticed. It wasn't just the house I was selling. It was the version of myself that had been tethered to it. The version of me that had been waiting for validation, for someone else to tell me I was worth something. I was ready for a change, ready for a new chapter where I could finally live for myself. The process was difficult, not because I was emotionally attached to the house, but because it forced me to confront the life I had left behind. I found boxes of old photographs, pictures of Daniel as a child, pictures of me when I was younger, before I had given so much of myself away. There were memories of vacations we had taken together, birthdays I had spent organizing and celebrating, all of it. And yet, as I looked at each photograph, I didn't feel the deep sorrow I once might have. Instead, I felt a strange sense of closure. The memories were there, but they no longer held the same weight. They were just that, memories. And I was ready to move forward. I started planning for my new life. I found an apartment in the city, small but cozy with a view of the skyline that I had always dreamed of. The idea of living alone, of having a space that was truly mine, was terrifying at first. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was exactly what I needed. A fresh start. A place where I didn't have to be anyone's mother or wife or daughter. Just me. Just Claire. I made the move over a few weekends, packing up my belongings and sorting through the remnants of my old life. The process was cathartic, almost like shedding an old skin. I got rid of the things that no longer served me. The clothes I had been holding on to for years, the mementos of a life I was no longer living. I let go of all of it, and with each item I discarded, I felt lighter. The day I moved into my new apartment was one of the most empowering days of my life. I didn't look back. I didn't second-guess myself. I was walking away from the past, not with regret, but with a sense of triumph. I had finally made a choice that was solely mine, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was living the life I was meant to live. But even as I embraced this new beginning, I couldn't deny that the ripple effects of my actions were still being felt. The phone calls from Daniel became less frequent, but the tension between us remained. He hadn't fully understood why I had done what I did. I knew that. But what was more important was that I had come to understand why I had to do it. I had to stop being a placeholder in his life. I had to stop being the woman who could be relied on for everything, but never truly seen. A few weeks after I moved into the apartment, I got a letter in the mail from Daniel. It was a long one, and I could tell it had taken him some time to write. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was a recognition that things had been difficult, that I had been hurt, and that he didn't fully understand the depth of my actions. The letter ended with, "I still don't fully understand everything, but I'm trying. I hope we can find a way forward, but I know I've got a lot of work to do. I want you to know that I'm proud of you, Mom. Even if I didn't show it before, I see you now, and I'll keep working on being the son you deserve." Reading those words was surreal. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't what I had wanted from him, but it was progress, and that was enough. I wrote back a simple, honest letter. I told him that I appreciated his words, that I had no expectations, but that I needed time to heal. I wasn't ready to jump back into a relationship with him. I wasn't sure when or if I would be, but I also wasn't going to close the door on him completely. I had learned to give myself the space to decide what I wanted, and I had learned to trust myself enough to take it. I placed the letter in the mailbox and stood there for a moment, just breathing. It felt like a weight had been lifted. I had finally made the decision to stop carrying the burden of other people's expectations. And now I was learning how to carry only what I wanted. It was a slow process, but I was finally doing it. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my new life. I spent time with old friends, made new ones, and enjoyed the simple pleasures I had neglected for so long. I learned how to sit in the quiet and enjoy my own company, something I had never allowed myself to do before. But even as I embraced my newfound freedom, I knew I hadn't truly let go of everything. There were still wounds to heal, relationships to repair, and lessons to learn. But I wasn't afraid of the future anymore. I wasn't afraid of what I might lose, because I knew now that I could never lose myself again. I had found my voice, and I would never be silenced again. It's funny, really, how life can change so quietly, almost without you noticing until one day you wake up and realize you're standing in a completely different place from where you were before. That's what happened to me. It wasn't some dramatic moment of revelation. It wasn't some grand gesture. It was just a steady, quiet shift. And when I looked around, I saw a woman I didn't recognize at first, strong, independent, calm. Someone who had chosen herself, finally. The weeks that followed my move into the apartment were the most peaceful I'd felt in years. Sure, there were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But every time those doubts crept in, I reminded myself of what I had left behind. The guilt, the constant need to please, the weight of being invisible in my own life. None of that had been worth holding on to, and none of it could be worth holding on to anymore. I found joy in the little things. Cooking meals for myself without worrying if someone would appreciate it. Spending lazy Sunday mornings reading books that had been on my shelf for ages, but that I'd never had the time to read before. It was all simple, but it was all mine. I could breathe in a way I hadn't been able to for a long time. And yet, even in my newfound peace, there was still a part of me that felt unsettled, unfinished. Daniel's letter still sat on my kitchen counter. I hadn't replied yet, but I knew the time would come. I wasn't ready to dive back into that relationship fully, not yet. I had to heal first, but when the time was right, I would write him back. I would tell him that I appreciated his apology, but that I still needed time. I needed him to show me he understood, not just through words, but through actions. I needed to see that he respected my choices, respected my boundaries, and when he did, when he proved that he truly saw me, then we could move forward. The most surprising part of all this wasn't the silence from Daniel or Emily. It wasn't the distance I had created between us. It was the fact that I was okay with it. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I just was. I was living my life, and I was finally allowing myself to feel everything that came with it. The freedom, the peace, the joy, and even the occasional pain. All of it was part of my new reality. And so I moved forward. I didn't need the past to define me anymore. I didn't need to keep reaching for approval from people who had never truly seen me. I was enough on my own. I knew that now. I had learned that through every sacrifice, every tear, every quiet moment of rage and regret. I had learned that I could live for myself without guilt or apology. The future wasn't perfect, it never would be, but I no longer feared it. I wasn't afraid of change, of stepping into the unknown. I had already taken the hardest step of all, choosing myself. And with that choice, I knew I was ready for whatever came next, because for the first time in my life, I was the one in control, and I would never, ever let anyone take that from me again.